Black wealth as well. But I think I'm going to leave that conversation for the beginning of another stream because I want to talk to you about what it's like to actually like the community of black people and how money is dispersed through economic disparity. That was what this whole like general piece was going to be on, but I'm going to be honest with you, I kind of don't want to edit that tonight, so I'll do that as a nice big opening piece for the next stream. But yeah, black wealth. So let's talk about what the US gets wrong about
This is an
minimum
American
wage.
sweatshop. They flourished in the early 1900s when people were desperate for work. And since there were no regulations on what they had to pay, they paid workers next to nothing. So the US adopted something that had already worked in other countries, a minimum wage. This is a chart of the minimum wage in the United States over the past 60 years. You can see how it's gone up and up and up from $1 an hour in 1960 to $7.25 today. Go America, right? But this chart is actually pretty misleading. If you take the same line but adjust it for inflation, you'll see the problem. Every time the minimum wage has been raised, inflation has dragged it right back down. Really, America's minimum wage hasn't gone up. It's essentially stayed the same since the 80s. What you're seeing here, this constant up and down, this is weird. It's not how the rest of the world does it, and it leads to a bunch of problems for American workers and businesses. But it doesn't have to be this way.
The minimum wage sets the smallest amount that a business anywhere in the country can pay its workers each hour.
But when that first bill became law in 1938, it had one big problem.
That first law didn't actually set any kind of guidance on when and how you're supposed to raise the minimum wage in the future.
That meant that if the minimum wage was going to go up, Congress would have to pass a new law. That's what these steps are. But as we already know, they aren't occurring enough to keep up with inflation. And this system also makes the US minimum wage sort of unpredictable. Look at this period. Starting in 1997, the minimum wage sat at $5.15 an hour for 10 years. Then it was raised in 2007 to $7.25 by 2009. Cool, but that's a 40% increase in a pretty short time, after a decade of inaction. How do you plan for that if you own a business?
Not having that consistency does raise a lot of problems for business owners. Will they have to lay off employees? Will they have to reduce work hours? Or will they just raise prices on their customers?
Imagine how much smoother that could all go if the minimum wage just kind of went up over time. Well, we don't have to imagine it. In France, they automatically raise their minimum wage every single year. They tie it to inflation and the average salary of a French worker. In Australia, a commission reviews the minimum wage every year, considering economic factors like inflation. The UK also has a commission, made up of union, business, and economic experts. The Czech Republic's commission consults with employer and union representatives. Their line is lower overall than America's, but it still trends upwards. Same with Costa Rica, and their committee reviews the minimum wage twice a year. In most countries, the minimum wage is in the hands of economic officials. In the US, it's in the hands of politicians. And that goes about as well as you'd expect.
Today, the federal minimum wage is a poverty wage.
Last thing we need are more one-size-fits-all Washington mandates.
It could eliminate up to 3.7 million jobs.
It would lift 1.3 million Americans out of poverty.
Raise the wage for 33 million people, a quarter of the workforce.
Those wages are only available if you get hired.
Working people are doing their jobs. Let us do ours.
Republicans have generally resisted increasing the minimum wage. They tend to support a lot of pro-business policies, and the business leaders do not want minimum wage increases. Democrats, on the other hand, they have a lot of support from labor unions, so they're the ones who you're usually pushing for an increase to the minimum wage.
So that's why Congress rarely agrees on raising the minimum wage, and what makes America's system different than other countries. This chart shows how much a minimum wage worker makes compared to the average worker in every developed country with a minimum wage. All these countries have some kind of commission or formula to determine what the minimum wage should be, and they review it every year or two. And then there's the US, who does neither and is dead last. If the US had done something similar, like tie...
Why do people say that the United States is the greatest country in the world? That literally makes no sense to me. We do nothing. We make cool movies. That's about it.
The minimum wage to the average wage each year, we'd be here. Not amazing, but not an outlier. What we're talking about is the federal minimum wage, which applies to everyone who works in America. But states can set their own too, and about half of them currently have a higher minimum wage than the federal one, like Washington State.
Yo, and I said this earlier, how is weed legal in one place but not legal in another place? That makes no sense to me. I don't get, what are we doing here? What are we talking about here?
Which in 1998 decided to raise theirs every single year based on inflation. Sound familiar?
I mean, it's such a logical idea. It's done in other countries. It really doesn't make sense why it's not done at the federal level.
It does make sense because, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk to you about how capitalism can end up owning politicians. We're going to end up talking to you about how there are a lot of people out there who just do not want you to succeed. It's dumb. It's really dumb. The reason why, like, other states do things that other states don't is because we have the separation of state power, which is cool and all. But I would think if one place is doing it better than another place, maybe all places should just do it if it benefits everybody. But then again, we get into the argument about small businesses and this and that. And I'm just like, if a small business pays $11 an hour, but is consistent work, won't just fire you, chances to grow, you might own a little stock, you might own a little this, a little of that. I would take that over the $15 job that barely schedules me, treats me like shit. Like, you can have different rates for small businesses, but you should also have government mandates that helps them build that, so they don't have to suffer in the first, like, let's say 2 years of a minimum wage rise. Like, it's really weird when people talk about small businesses, and I think to myself, like, okay, so if you work for a bigger corporation, you shouldn't be allowed to have your own place. Like, if I'm working 40 hours a week and can't afford rent, something's not wrong with me. Don't ask me to get a better job. I'm still burning 40 hours a week. I should be paid appropriately. You could do wage based on living, no, I was gonna say living conditions, but I was thinking of a better word. Based on proximity to your job. Like, if your job is in Target and you live in such and such a district, and the average wage there or the average income there somehow is like higher than your wage, we boost up your wage. You can pay it so that way everybody could, but it's just gonna end up with an entire boost. We need a boost badly. And there's plenty of reasons why it's not happening, but the biggest one at all levels is corporate donors giving in to these GOP and some Democratic people who refuse to raise the wage because they don't like that. The poor should stay poor. That's why you hear a lot of people repeat the burger flipper line. You argue that, like, oh, somebody who works at McDonald's will make just as much money as someone who works as a teacher, and I'm like, you don't think teachers' wages should be raised? Then you think the McDonald's worker should have their wage lowered, which brings me back to the point I made earlier today. How the fuck is McDonald's so successful, and you think the people that make it successful should make less, or shouldn't make any more, I should say, but you somehow devalue a teacher to making as little as that and don't understand that they're underpaid? Like, you're fighting against the littler guy because you want to protect the little. I don't get it. Like, you're simping for a system that literally does nothing but harms you. What are you doing to yourself there, bro?
Really, it's just about politics.
Right now, politicians are yet again debating what the minimum wage should be. Should it be $15, $11, or should it not be raised at all? But maybe the solution to this never-ending debate is to take the decision out of politicians' hands.
So, y'all know me, contrarian to the max, feeling it, doing it. I love to ingest right-wing sites too to figure out what the fuck they be talking about, so that way I'll be on point with my debates here. Sorry, I had something on the top of my head I wanted to say, and that's why I wanted to look at my phone for it. I want to debunk this video because I feel like it's not going to be correct because it's coming from PragerU. So we're going to try that. Let's see how much they got wrong.
Progressive politicians love to talk about raising the minimum wage. It makes them sound caring, compassionate, concerned. They're on the side of the worker standing against the greedy employer. The current call is for a national $15 an hour minimum wage, more than double the current federal rate of $7.25. A number of cities and states are already there, including New York, California, Washington, D.C., and Seattle. Others are considering it. The left casts the minimum wage debate as a war between employee and employer. But most business owners pay their workers as much as they can. Finding and keeping good people is the hardest part of any employer's job. I know. For 17 years, I ran CKE Restaurants, the parent company of Carl's Jr. and Hardee's. Our company and franchise restaurants employed over 75,000 people.
That means you're not a small business, so what you're about to argue is about to be totally wrong, but go off, Chief.
But as with most retail businesses, our profit margins were razor thin. Based on my experience, if we adopt the national minimum wage of $15, here's what will happen. 1, a lot of people will lose their jobs or have their hours reduced. According to a 2014 congressional
If I work for let's use basic numbers here. If I work for $10 for 8 hours, I make $80 at the end of the day. If I work for 15 for 4, I lose $20, but I work half as long, 4 hours. So I make 60. I may lose money, or let's say even say 5 hours. I may lose money, but I work less. Therefore, with that extra time, I could go to another job that pays that same rate. Therefore, I'm making more money. Or with that extra time, I'll be able to take care of the things I need to be able to take care of. Hours being reduced is a hard thing to deal with, yes, but I think most employers would pretty much try to tie it to your original wage anyway, and less hours and more pay is always great for the worker. So, and plus it's better for you because you get more efficient employees. Imagine if I only had to go to work 4 hours a day. I mean, I did when I was doing after school teaching, but that's a different story. Imagine if you only had to work 4 hours a day and you could still make the same amount. Every day you go to work, you'd be refreshed. You'd be refreshed. You'd be, God damn, bro, hitting me up. Give me a second. You'd be refreshed. You'd come into work, straight as a dart. You wouldn't be tired at the 4 hour mark and be like, oh, I'm slagging around for the next 4 hours. You'd be on point. So you're talking about the efficiency of employees versus them making maybe a little less money. Now, of course, I'm doing this in the most generous of cases. We all know employers are greedy and will do anything they want to get their their profit margins to go higher. Okay, fair. We'll talk about the greed of capitalism and how it affects the worker directly in another day. But the obviousness aside, clearly, very clearly, very clearly, there's other factors that could go into this that actually makes reducing hours pretty nice. Now, losing your job because your job couldn't pay you the $15 probably means that job was never going to be able to pay you anything higher, and now you have to go look for something else, which is what they tell us to do. So you either have it one of two ways. You either have us get better jobs that pay more, which is what the minimum wage being raised would do almost automatically, or you shut the fuck up. Like there's no
Congressional Budget Office study, just a $10 minimum wage would cost 500,000 jobs as businesses terminate employees. Obviously, far more jobs would be lost at $15 an hour. To survive, employers would have to reduce hours, even for workers who manage to keep their jobs. That's a pay cut. 2, businesses will close, and the jobs they created will disappear. A recent report from researchers at the Harvard Business School found that each $1 increase in the minimum wage results in a 4 to 10% increase in the likelihood of restaurants closing.
Yo, okay, here's that point I made a couple streams ago. What do you think of small businesses? Most people think of restaurants. Literally do not care about comic book stores, art stores, boutiques, any of that. Like literally nothing. They care about nothing but restaurants.
An over $7 an hour increase to $15 would be devastating, not only for restaurants, but for small businesses and their employees.
See? Hyperbole. There's only 2 options. You either do everything great for people or it hurts everybody.
3, young people will lose that entry-level job opportunity.
Why do all young people have to have, entry-level job opportunities? There's not enough of those because the minimum wage is so low, everybody has to take everything anyway. What the fuck are you talking about? Disingenuous. I knew I was going to find some errors in this. This is disingenuous. I'm not doing this to be a contrarian. That's disingenuous. You're bringing up the young people argument, but you refuse, so only young people work at McDonald's? So he's going to say that the competition for the entry-level jobs, since they pay $15 now, will drive all those people who were making less to go down the ladder as opposed to up because they can make more money there. Therefore, young people won't have a market of entry-level jobs to get into as they grow. I know that's what he's going to say. That's bullshit. That's because then you don't do anything for helping them get out of those entry-level positions. They don't get promoted. They end up finding other jobs that are also entry-level that they can work as they go through schooling or whatever. Not every person can sacrifice 40 hours a week, especially if they're young. College, interests, travel, all that stuff that they're supposed to be doing. You're going to say, how are they going to make the money for that? Exactly. But if he says it and I predicted it,
My first job was scooping ice cream at a Baskin-Robbins in Cleveland, Ohio in the 1960s.
3 seconds.
I would pay just $1 an hour, but it taught me valuable lessons like the importance of showing up on time.
You can't learn showing up on time, teamwork, and presenting a happy demeanor to customers for more money? That's slate.
Teamwork and presenting a happy demeanor to customers. No one can get that better job until they have their first job. 4, the cost of all work.
That doesn't make any sense. Then what is the tech industry? What is Silicon Valley then? Why are TikTok and Instagram stars all younger? What the fuck are you talking about? Disingenuous. That's a lie. Nobody can get that better job until they get an entry-level job. Then what happens when all the entry-level jobs are filled and there's still people unemployed? Were they not eligible for an entry-level job? Aren't there other jobs that need to be filled? Don't even say, by more experienced people. No. Then eventually you're just going to have a floor of people who can't get into the workforce. I finished college and I have a degree, but I need an entry-level job first. Aren't I competing with the young person who skipped college and just went straight to work? We both have the same experience. Which one should you hire? We'll hire the one with the more experience and we'll put you in the entry-level position. But now I can't afford rent. So I'm supposed to work here and just try my hardest to hopefully get promoted one day? But what about in the meantime? So that's lying.
Workers will have to go up. If you hire a dishwasher at $15 an hour, your cooks will be unhappy with their wages. You're going to have to pay everybody more, which increases labor costs across the board. That's more pressure on profits. Too much pressure and you're out of business. 5, fewer people will open businesses. $15 an hour is a very steep hill to climb.
Which is why we should have
Would-be
climbed it
entrepreneurs will
slowly.
do the math on labor costs and realize it's just not worth the risk. This is a real cost to the economy that we can't measure. A company that never exists never employs anyone. 6, prices for everything will go up as businesses pass higher labor costs along to consumers.
Okay, we know that this part is a lie because prices have been going up anyway. I remember when bread was able to be sold for $1, was like, 99 cents for a loaf. I've seen prices at my local bodega and supermarkets go up from a very low amount to a high amount, and nothing happened to the tide of inflation or wage increase. That's been happening since I was a kid, so I really don't know what you're talking about here.
One of two things will happen. Either consumers won't pay the higher prices and businesses will lay off workers or close, or consumers will pay higher prices and have less money to spend elsewhere.
So what do you call the housing market? And we just watched it. People will pay the higher prices and not have money for anything else. People are already not having money for else because they can't afford anything else because they don't make enough money. Are you saying we're in a trapped vortex of you systematically keeping people in a state of poverty so that way you can continue to churn the profit machine? Capitalism go brrr. Okay, got it. That's clever. That's parasitic. If that's the function of capitalism today, then I don't want it no more.
Either way, the higher minimum wage will represent a drag on the overall economy. Now, this may sound like doom and gloom, but it's already a reality for many business owners and workers in the cities and states that are raising the minimum wage. In San Francisco, AQ, a 2012 James Beard Award finalist for the best new restaurant in America,
Restaurants again.
saw rising labor costs drive its profit margins down from 8.5% in 2012 to 1.5% by 2015. So it shut the doors. Jeremy Marin's chain of Cuban restaurants in New York closed 2 locations because of minimum wage increases and has raised prices at the restaurants he's still operating. The minimum wage, he said, is going up too fast. We can't catch our breath. Kevin McNamee
raise
is
it steadily each year. The reason for the 15, the massive increase, is because everything else is being priced out at that rate. If we had done it steadily and didn't have a fucking housing crisis 10 years ago, maybe we wouldn't be in that situation today. And your man Donald Trump did nothing to help that.
Chiropractor in California. I'll be moving my 2 companies out of Los Angeles, he wrote in a letter to the New York Times. When the city compels me to pay employees $15 an hour, it comes out of my pocket. Last year, my employees made more than I did.
That's good, bro. They're good.
Now, these stories are already all too common. Expect them to become more so as cities and states pile on the $15 minimum wage bandwagon. So, if a $15 minimum wage doesn't help workers and doesn't help employers, who exactly does it help?
I'd love to see his counter argument. Like, who is this for?
Well, maybe just the progressive politicians who manage to mislead voters into believing that it's the right thing to do. Sounding caring, compassionate, and concerned is all well and good, but having a job is better. I'm Andy Puzder.
Oh, you filthy pores. Don't ever think about ever getting more money ever again. You dirty marsupials. You dirty marsupials. Top of the hour, every hour, 60-second ad break. If you don't want to see the ads and you'd like an uninterrupted viewing experience, please do me a favor. Hit that subscribe. You can subscribe for free with your Twitch Prime, or you can subscribe with a Tier 1 subscription. Emotes and other surprises coming soon. Running that ad now. All right, let's move on. Oh, this is a juicy one.
Hello, freak bitches. So you don't think there should be any minimum wage at all?
No.
No, none. But so someone working for $1 an hour doesn't bother you?
Well, I mean, it's better than working for zero. I mean, people think that they want to impose their morals and say, well, it's not right for somebody to work for $1 an hour. Well, people make rational decisions, right? And so if somebody is accepting $1 an hour, and that must mean that nobody offered them $1.50, nobody offered them $2. I mean, this is a competitive market. I mean, I know you have an employee over here. I mean, could you pay this guy $1 an hour? Would he work for you?
I don't think so.
Yeah, well, I guess because he could get more.
Right, but he's educated and skilled, and he's an actual audio engineer, and
of course,
right. But it's very difficult for people to get that sort of an education, particularly in is Puerto Rico thought of as a third world environment?
No,
it's not a country.
It's not third world. But let's say some kid came in here that had no experience whatsoever, but he wanted to learn. He wanted to just get you coffee and just sit around and be around you. He's not that productive.
Yeah, they use interns, right? A lot of radio stations do that, and they don't pay them anything.
I know that's zero. That's $0 an hour.
I can't do that.
Well, then but maybe you pay him $5 an hour, whatever it is. But people are going to accept a job that's the best one they can get, and so.
Oh my God, how is he going to argue? I mean, I know that he's smart and he's going to actually pull out some interesting details, but how on earth are you getting ready to justify people will accept a job for whatever wage it is if that's the best one they can get? That's the whole point of the minimum wage, to avoid people accepting jobs for $5 an hour because there's nothing else out there paying. Therefore, they will have to work for the same amount of hours. Maybe doing tenuous work, maybe doing the simplest of work, but they're still working and providing value to you to allow you to profit in a capitalist society. And you're going to argue that it shouldn't be set to something so that way they can also be productive members of society? Or should they only live in their mom's basement and go to work because somebody said they have to work or else they can't live there?
If somebody is working for $1 an hour or $2 an hour, by default, I know that they couldn't find a higher job than that. And the reason is because they don't have a lot of skills. But if you don't have a lot of skills, the best thing you can do is get a job so you can get some skills. That's where you learn skills. You get more skills. There are people that pay to get skills, right? If you go to school, you actually have to pay tuition. If I'm getting paid $1 an hour while I learn something that has value, that's better. You have people now.
Nope. There's free courses. You could no, that doesn't work in a YouTube era. I can learn how to build a house on YouTube. And then, no, that's a horrible argument with the easiest flaw of I can build houses on YouTube for free. I have to pay to learn that skill. People work on the job and learn things. You don't go into economics and finance and your numbers and stuff, but you learn about what really goes on in the real world through experience. You're conflating experience of the job with being able to do that job effectively. You teach me how to do something and then ask me to do that 5 times in a row, I can do that.
Borrowing money to learn a skill. People graduate college and they're in debt.
Right, but that's a weird argument, right? Because you're assuming that they're going to get a skill. I mean, they might just be handling packages and picking them up and moving to another location, or digging a hole,
even that's show up on time, be responsible.
See look, 2 conservative people said the same thing. You learn skills like being on time, being responsible, being good to customers, et cetera, non grata. And I'm like, do you guys think that those jobs are the only jobs in which a minimum wage matters? Awesome.
So discipline.
Yeah, there's a lot. Because everybody else who makes more money than this, doesn't need that because they did it. And it's not like they just fell into it. Do we understand how many people on finance and Wall Street are just brothers and sisters of other people they knew who's yo, come to this place, I'll hook you up?
There's a lot of stuff that you learn when you have a job. But the problem with the minimum wage is that the minimum wage basically hurts the very people that it's intended to help. Because the minimum wage basically says if you are a worker, if you cannot convince an employer to pay you $7.25 or $10 an hour, whatever the minimum wage is, then you cannot accept that job. See, it doesn't hurt the employer. It hurts the employee because it limits his options. It limits his ability to sell his labor for the highest price that he can get, and it limits his access to the job market. It's you can't get on that ladder. You remove the lower rungs, and so I can't climb up because of this arbitrary minimum wage. Because when you pass a minimum wage, you're not going to force an employer, right? If I'm an employer and there's a minimum wage of $10 an hour, and somebody comes to me and they can deliver $5 an hour worth of productivity, meaning if I hire that person that will benefit me by $5 an hour, I'm not going to pay them $10 an hour because then I lose $5 an hour. The only way I'm going to hire somebody who's going to give me $5 an hour worth of productivity is if I can buy him, if I can, hire him for less than $5 an hour. Right. So I can make a profit. So it says
making a profit off of people's labor is the key to capitalism, and therefore the inherent moral disaster attached to that is if I can get you to work and give me more productivity than I can pay you, I can make a profit off that. I factor in costs of whatever I'm selling. Labor costs is obviously that manufacturing and whatnot. I put in the cost of how much it is to buy these things that I need you to put together. Boom, I make a profit when I sell it for that price. If you raise the minimum wage, you squeeze the margins, therefore they have to raise the price. I've heard that argument before. I literally just destroyed it. Now I'm using Ben Shapiro terms. Destroyed, annihilated. That doesn't work, because then what you're also saying is that it's a perpetual cycle of people never getting to be able to afford things unless they get up to those higher rungs. But again, the capitalistic system is a pyramid. It is set up where the lowest amount of people make this amount, higher gets higher, and it gets higher and higher. The problem is that all the wealth is going up and the people at the top are not spending it downwards, they're sharing it in those top rungs. Therefore, people who get richer off of people getting richer are already rich themselves. There's no inherent reason for that bottom layer to ever rise up. You cannot have, the pyramid doesn't work if the majority of the people are at the top making a lot, because then you wouldn't have enough money. See, that's where it's weird that we say we're the richest country in the world, because at some point, rich how? Like, we are rich because people and innovations, and they take all that money and hoard it. If there was more distribution of wealth, if those top billionaires were like, yo, I'm giving $1 billion to this city, $1 billion to that city, $1 billion, and it just all kept circulating, it would come down, and that's what trickle-down economics was supposed to be. But it's not trickling down because nobody's spending at that top level. I'm not buying 75 buildings and then dropping the prices down because I own them, and I'm taking the loss because I'm going to make that money anyway. Like, they're buying the buildings and then raising it means people who can only afford more come in, and gentrification starts, and that's that whole process right there. Yeah, see, it's not hard to figure that shit out when you are quite aware of the disparity, but they want to pretend that doesn't exist.
It's like a floor. It's like if you cannot deliver enough productivity of whatever that minimum wage is, then you can't get a job. And so it's basically making it illegal for people to work. It is the
what is the reach? It's making it illegal for people to work. If everybody says my labor, regardless of what it is worth $15 an hour, because that's the only way I can get a home, I can buy food, clothes, show up on time, get a car, etc., insurance, all that, then that's what it just has to be. Or you drop the prices of everything else around, so $7.25 is affordable for people who, or $7.25 is enough that people can afford things. I can't buy a car on a $7.25 wage. That's just not happening. Doesn't matter how many hours I work. It's just not happening. Rent, medical emergencies, savings, investments, clothes, food, heat, anything to enjoy myself.
Stupidest law that anybody has ever conceived. It should be obliterated. I mean, there are some countries, like Singapore, does not have a minimum wage. And, the average income in Singapore is higher than it is here. Per capita, there's a lot more millionaires there. I mean, people have no problem. We didn't always have a minimum wage in the United States. I mean, this is a creation of government. And, but the initial minimum wages, if you want to actually go to the origins of minimum wage in the United States, it was about trying to prevent employers from hiring the Chinese or hiring blacks. They were trying to force the minimum wage as a way to create unemployment. It was
No, that is a lie. You can literally read FDR's statement on it. The minimum wage was set so that way people after the Great Depression wouldn't be going to work at these sweatshops for $1 an hour and still not being able to afford anything and literally struggling. The worth of the man's labor is enough that he should be able to afford everything that the American dream is about, including a house, education, and a family. Like, that's what it was about. It had nothing to do with backing out of hiring blacks and the Chinese.
There wasn't a good motivation, but
yes, there was. Then why do other developed nations have it? How do all these people in other places agree on shit that's like beautiful and they report more happiness, they have a more cohesive society, and we're still arguing like, should we give the peasants more crumbs? Who knows?
Yes, when they try to sell it to the voters, oh, this is all about we don't want people to be exploited. But, you know, it's not exploitation. If people voluntarily accept a job because it's the best job they can find, the person who's offering the best job is not exploiting them. They're giving them.
Yes, they are. If the best job I can find is something at McDonald's and you tell me I can only be paid this and nothing more, I never get a raise, I never get anything, I'm effectively going to, at some point, generate more wealth for you than I generate for myself. If you need an explanation of that and you want to call me batshit crazy and that I don't understand economics and you want to go shit on me in the comments, here, we're going to try this for an example. And if somehow you disagree with this, you're fucking dumb. But, okay. A bank teller makes a deposit of $1 million in someone's account. Helps them make the deposit. They bring it in through checks and cash. The bank uses that money to pay out interest loans and pay out other things to which they get a kickback of that money from. If that $1 million turns into a loan and onto which they make maybe, let's say, $140,000, my labor of just simply making that experience enough for that person to want to continue to bank with us netted you a profit of $140,000. I only saw $58 from that. Hold on. $40 hours, I was going by $58. What did I say, 56? Or did I get the number right? I only saw $58 that day. I got a lunch break. Out of that $58, let's say it cost me $5.50 for transportation to the job. I got lunch and I was really hungry. I didn't have enough time to cook anything because I was taking care of my 3-year-old daughter and I was more focused on that. So I kind of just ate like a microwave meal. So I went out and got lunch. Let's say I got a slice of pizza at a fine restaurant or a fine establishment with a Coke. You know, they be charging like $5 for that combo. And let's say during that day, I had to get a little bit of groceries so I could make a meal. Let's say I somehow managed to do that on 14. I put aside a little bit of money for that electric bill that I know is going to be due. So I did that with 9. My Spotify payment came out that day. So I lost $10, and my Netflix also came in because, you know, I got to get my movies, and that was, let's say, to be nice, it was $4.99, even though we know it's not. I only made $9.51. While those costs won't recur every day, I've already made less than I've already made so much less that it's literal pennies if you were to throw me like a $10 commission bonus. That's how bad it is to make that argument.
Them an opportunity.
Because now what you're saying is that people whose labor is valued less than the profit they make don't deserve a piece of that profit.
And if you're denied an opportunity, I mean, there are a lot of people, oh, great, you know, they're going to get the minimum wage up to $15 an hour. Well, what good is it being unemployed at $15 an hour? It's better to be employed at $5 an hour than unemployed at $15.
That makes no sense. Then why not just drop the minimum wage all the way down to $3 and say it's better to be employed at $1 than it is to be employed making $0?
Because being unemployed means you make nothing, right?
Where devil's advocate would be that if you can't afford to pay someone $15 an hour, then you probably shouldn't have employees in the first place. Your business doesn't function that well.
No, there are plenty.
Does that make sense?
No, because there are plenty of jobs where you have entry-level positions. I mean, if you
see, now we keep talking about entry-level positions. Oh, if you're an entry-level worker, you only make 10, and then as you go up, you'll make that eventual 15. But how many people go up versus how many people are working at the bottom floor? Therefore, that is an exclusive club. Therefore, not everybody has that opportunity. Therefore, if everybody left the entry-level position to go find higher opportunity, there wouldn't be enough opportunity for everybody there. So some people are going to have to stay down at that lower rung until something bigger opens up. Therefore, if the majority of the people can only find things that are at the bottom floor and not at the top level, then how are they ever going to get the experience to be able to handle the higher position? Oh, they can't unless they take more of their time out to learn to play the game by your system instead of just raising the minimum wage.
I think that there should be no entry-level jobs. I mean, you go back to the days of full-service gas stations, right? Back in the day when, you didn't have to pump your own gas.
Still the case in New Jersey and a few other states.
Yeah, New Jersey, they mandate it, but you still don't get the level of service. I mean, if you pulled into a gas station 40 years ago, not only did they pump your gas, but they checked under your hood, they checked your tires, they washed your windows. They did all sorts of things, with your car. They didn't make very much money. They lived off of tips by and large. It was the minimum wage that eliminated almost all those jobs. It's the minimum wage that is the reason that we have.
No, it wasn't the minimum wage. You can correlate that, but you could also say, why are we paying all these people $4 an hour, $5 an hour to do all that when these people could just do it themselves and we could just rake in the profits instead of doing that? Why don't we just take that $40 we gave that guy who worked 10 hours for $4 an hour and why don't we just take that?
People so much self-serve. But what happened, a lot of these people, these kids that worked in filling stations became mechanics because all these filling stations had a mechanic there and they learned auto mechanics, and a lot of them went on to own their own gas stations. But of course, a lot of them this was their work experience that formed the basis for the rest of their life. A lot of young kids had these jobs, summer jobs. And so there's nothing wrong with entry-level employment. There's nothing wrong with people learning the responsibility of having a job, of showing up, of customer service, of sales. I mean, my first jobs were all sales. I was selling subscriptions door to door. I was telephone sales of the Z Channel in California. I was knocking on doors selling cable television. I worked in a shoe store selling shoes. I mean,
you're a hustler. But you were talking about you as a young man, right?
Yes,
think
as
a lot
kid.
of people think of the minimum wage as applied to adults that have to take care of children, that have to put a roof over their head and food on the table. And you're saying that they shouldn't be having those jobs.
Well, by the time you are an adult with kids, you should have accumulated the skills to earn a lot more than a minimum wage. See, that's
that ignores a whole subset of humanity.
The argument when people say, hey, you can't afford a family, you can't support a family on the minimum wage. Of course, you shouldn't even be trying to support a family.
But people were able to do it beforehand, so why can't we do it now?
If you can only earn the minimum wage, you shouldn't have a family. You should realize, hey, I can't afford a family yet.
So poor shouldn't have family. Got it.
Let me acquire the skills before I start fathering children, right, and getting married. Let me make sure I can support myself. I mean, a lot of people who are having the minimum wage, they're living at home. They don't need to pay the rent. They're living.
Oh, didn't I say that? I told you that was his argument from jump.
Rent-free. What they need is a job. They need maybe gas money, get some money so I can take a girl out on a date. But I gotta get
bachelors, young men. He's talking specifically about young men, not about young women, not about older women, not even women in general. He's specifically talking about young men. Oh, they're living at home. Well, if my dad is injured and I need to take care of him, where am I gaining the time to take all these skills in? He skipped, sometimes accidents happen. People get pregnant. What happens if somebody in the family is injured? What happens if, God forbid, you lose, your family member and you have to figure out a way to survive? You're taking such a specific subset of humanity and applying it to everybody that you don't care about any social issue at all, any socioeconomic downfall of any other group of ethnic people. Wow, what a great analysis. Now, the points that he's making are not invalid insofar that you argue directly on those topics in that manner. But when you exclude any other type of scenario to make this point, you're being disingenuous because you either are so focused on the target as opposed to being focused on the general impact that you completely skip out everybody. And this yet again goes back to the idea these people that argue this don't really care about the actual situations that poor people live in. They care more about the bottom line. They care more about thinking about people in binaries. You either have the skills to make more money or you don't, regardless of your actual situation in life.
Get some work experience. I got to get out there. I got to know what it's like to work. I got to see, I got to live in the real world. And that's what used to happen. I mean, you don't have all these summer jobs anymore. Kids don't have the opportunity because the minimum wage has already priced them out. A lot of older people now are taking those jobs. And so the employment opportunities aren't there. But when you just raise the minimum wage, all you're doing is raising the bar where you can get your job. You're not helping people. Now, there's always going to be some people that, there's going to be somebody who will make a little bit more because of the minimum wage. There's going to be those people. There's going to be some winners. But you're going to have lots of people that make nothing because of the minimum wage. And then, of course, because you're driving up the cost of labor, prices are going up. And so who is affected the most by higher prices? Poorer people, people who are working on minimum wage. And not only that, you end up with less quality. I mean, I hate it when, I call up a company and I'm just in voicemail hell and I'm going from one. I would like a real person to deal with. But, with the minimum wage, those jobs don't exist. There's so many jobs that have been automated out of existence.
Or if not automated, shipped overseas where there isn't any minimum wage restriction.
Too. I mean, that too. Yeah, you end up, if you actually get a real person, they're in India.
Right.
Right, but we have all these people in America who aren't working. Why can't they do those jobs? Yes, you're not going to be able to support a family on those jobs, but before you even get a family, you can have that job. And then maybe 5 or 10 years later, you'll work your way up the ladder, you'll get a skill, and then you can support a family. But
the assumption that you have to spend 5 to 10 years in a job before you can afford a family. If everybody has to fluctuate that way, then all of the pyramid would be equal. That's socialism. If I can hire 10 employees and have them all go up the ladder together at some point, right? I'm going to need a new set of 10 employees. If I can continue to do that, then therefore, I am keeping all castes equal. Everybody has equal opportunity to move up in the world because we have the money and the capital to do so. That's socialism. See, it's not hard if you believe. I get, though, the retraction to this. I can already in the back of my head hear the arguments against, people, or I can hear the argument against this because I understand that people have knee-jerk reactions to responding to this and saying, well, do you not believe this guy at all? Again, a lot of the points that you're making are not wrong. They're very narrow opinions. They're very centered in on a very specific, socioeconomic situation that we don't actually live in. Because all the Target workers cannot be promoted to manager. All of the people that work on the Target floor cannot be promoted. There are not enough positions on the second level of the second rung of that ladder for everyone to make it through. Now, you would say, well, not everybody deserves a promotion. Okay, so what are the people who can't survive supposed to do? How long do they work and wait for a chance at a promotion? If there's 10 people and I've only got 2 slots, who are the 2 people? After those 2 people go up, I have to replace those 2. When those 2 are time for their promotion to the third rung, only 1 can go. If the pyramid doesn't have equal growth for everybody, then it's not possible at all for everyone to go through this exact same scenario. Therefore, you are automatically saying, if we want to go by your logic, it is illegal to have children if you don't make a certain amount of money. It is illegal to try to own a home. It is illegal to try to do anything outside of the means of your income, even though you work the same amount of hours, producing probably more labor than you're being paid for people who rake in thousands and millions and billions of dollars in profit. Everybody can't be a small business owner on that because that everybody's a business. I made this a long time ago. Where everybody can't be a business owner because then there's nobody at the businesses. So you have to have consumers who have to have jobs, who have to have enough money to be able to consume the things that other people are working at, or being to go to consume and buy things where other people work at. which in the same sentence means that some people can't afford some things while some people can. And if if there's no opportunity for anybody to ever grow just on merit alone, you're pretending that there's a meritocracy here that doesn't exist. Therefore, either you're being disingenuous or you just straight up think poor people should die. And to what I will say, who the fuck is gonna buy the shit? Like,
nobody is supposed to be able to support a family. And if you try to tell an employer, hey, you gotta pay your fry cook enough money to support a family, you can't do that. There's not enough productivity cooking French fries. You can't support a family if all you can do is cook a French fry. You need to learn how to do something else before you can support a family, and you can't put that on the employer.
Now, when you say that Singapore has a higher average income, is that because, and no minimum wage, is that because there's a shitload of billionaires that have moved to Singapore because they don't have a minimum wage and because they can exploit lower class people or people that don't make much money?
The millionaires and billionaires are really not even affected by the minimum wage. What you'd have to look at is the rate of unemployment in
but
Singapore,
do they have good
which
tax
is tiny.
rates in Singapore?
They do.
They
Yes,
have
they
good
have
incentives for very rich people to move there, and doesn't that jack up the minimum wage, or not the minimum wage, rather the average?
Economists suggest that a living wage should be substantial enough to ensure that no more than 30% of it gets spent on housing. Therefore, if I make $725 times 40 times 52, but I'm going to do it times 4. That means I make $1,160 gross. That means I make what? Salary per year, 75. Whoa, I thought you were just going to give me... Okay, it's not going to just directly tell me. But anyway, let's just say you make $1,160. That means 30% of it. That means that you can only afford 300... Shit, sorry. I saw the glare off my glasses. I thought somebody walked right in front of me. Just looked like a shadow. Oh, somebody clipped that. I wonder if I really look spook. So that means that the total rent that I could afford, or that I should be able to afford for a decent house, is $348. The average rent in New York City right now. The average rent is in the thousands across the board, with the lowest average rent for a studio being $1,698, and with the average rent of a one bedroom being $1,700. The priciest areas are Lincoln Square, Flatiron, Tribeca, Nomad, Chelsea, NoHo, etc. But you can only afford $348 on minimum wage, and that's working 40 hours a week, 4 weeks, 52 weeks. So let's do that actually. Whoops. That means you make a total of $15,000 a year. That's before taxes, mind you. We'll do the same thing, 30% of your rent. That means you can only spend $4,524, and obviously, as we did this already, if you were to divide this by 12, you get $377 approximately. That means you're only allowed to spend $377 on rent. Where can you afford an apartment for $377 a month? Nowhere. So shut the fuck up. No, minimum wage literally doesn't work in this city. And I'm sure it doesn't work in a bunch of places.